Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Today is January 26th, Wednesday. Time is now 3:06 p.m. and I am calling this meeting of the Academic Senate at Santa Barbara City College to order. Our Academic Senate community values are posted on each and every agenda. There's something that the Senate developed 2 summers ago, and then we reapproved in the fall for our use and conversations and important work at the Senate. I'd like to highlight number 8 today, which is commit to working with an equity mindset and to upholding the mission of the college to foster an equitable, inclusive, respectful, participatory, and supportive community dedicated to the success of every student. As senators, we should center equity in all matters brought before us and question who may benefit from our decisions and actions and who may be harmed. Item 2.3, our Zoom meeting guidelines. Should anyone wish to speak from the public during public comments or the senators during our discussion periods, please raise your virtual hand in your Zoom meeting controls, and then I will call on you. Item 2.4, approval of the agenda. We do have one timed item, which is an information item, item 7.1. Vice President Joyce Coleman will be with us to discuss some COVID modifications. Back to campus and the COVID modifications that have happened this semester, not new ones. Okay. So other than that, items will be taken in the order as posted and distributed. And so now we are at item 3.1, public comment. So members of the public have the right to address the Senate. You will be given 3 minutes to do so. You can either address the Senate now, or you may do so before one of our items later in the agenda. So I'm seeing one hand raise. Christina Larina.
Hi there. I wanted to, if possible, like you said, Ray, bring up my public comment now, just in the fact that I have a conflict later.
That's great. Please
okay.
Do so now. Thanks.
Okay, sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Christina Jadena. I'm the EOPS Care Director here at Santa Barbara City College. And I just wanted to offer my enthusiastic support for equitable access to textbooks via the bookstore for all of our classes at Santa Barbara City College. As most of you know, one of the keystone program elements of EOPS and CARE is book grants, and our students, most of our students are first generation, low income, and folks of color who, like many of you know, do not have fiscal or social capital or resources to afford the books. And it really is, as you know, historically and continues to be an ongoing obstacle to access to college. So one of the things that's so important in the administration of our book grants, we need to keep a very clear paper trail and documentation trail linked to our bookstore so that we can really show that we are supporting our students with our grants. And so one of the things that's so key is to have the textbooks made available via the bookstore so that that student has immediate access, can get those books on time. And as many of you know, as instructors, what happens to our students is despite the fact they're in a special program and they do have a trusting cadre and support system, they may not always ask for help in a timely way and think that they have other resources fiscally and otherwise to either borrow a textbook or get a textbook, and it often does not happen. And so they fall behind quite quickly, fall out of favor with their group projects and their relationships with their professors, et cetera, and potentially have to either do poorly in the class or drop, et cetera, which then jeopardizes their eligibility in our program and further continued support. Currently, we do have students that struggle, that sometimes need textbooks that are not made available in the bookstore, and it gets very complicated very quickly just because we need to support them by any means necessary with credit cards, et cetera. And it can be a little bit of a wild goose chase. So as you know, many of the students that are not enrolled are EOPS students in our college. They've taken the biggest hit during the pandemic. And so we certainly want to continue to support them extensively and comprehensively with an equitable lens, which means keeping those book grants alive and well and having those textbooks via our bookstore. It's a huge source of support for them and for our program. So I just wanted to thank you all for listening and just put that public comment in right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And it's great hearing from you and your department and representing students. So I really appreciate you coming to Senate today. Are there any more public comments at this time? If yes, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, and then, Chelsea Lancaster. The floor is yours.
I, as an EOPS Care and CalWorks advisor, just wanted to really support and amplify what our director has said. I've worked at the college for, I think, almost 15 years, and I'm also a product of all these programs. I was a single parent student myself, receiving cash aid benefits through the county, and there is literally no way I could have afforded to purchase textbooks without the EOPS book grant. And that is the truth. And the times that I maybe didn't have enough of a book grant, I did not have any choice but to forego buying books because I was trying to survive and pay rent and food and and it's even more challenging now than it was then. And we know this. So this is really, if we're really talking about equity, and we're really talking about giving our students the things that they need to succeed and being a student-ready campus, that means that we need to do everything possible to provide them with the resources that they need. I also want to name that EOPS is not EOPS Care, CalWorks, Guardian Scholars, Transitions. We have a bunch of programs under our umbrella serving the most marginalized students on campus. I also want to name that we're not the only program. The Promise program also has to go through the campus store. And so this creates a barrier not only for EOPS eligible students and other students in marginalized populations, but also our Promise students. And I want us to really think critically about being straight out of high school. Oftentimes, again, as Christina Llerena said, first gen, very low income, struggling to survive, not even sure if college is where you want to be. And then not being able to buy your textbooks, and then failing your class because you can't afford the textbooks and maybe feeling shame as a result. And these are the kinds of things that make our students go away and not come back. So this is just really a moral imperative for us to really move this way. So I just want to thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you, Chelsea. Really appreciate you taking the time as well and sharing that insight. Definitely be valuable for our conversation later. At this time, is there any other requests for public comment for the Senate? Okay, I am seeing none. At this time, we have no minutes to review, so we are cruising right along, and we will head into item 5.1, my president's report. Let's see, 2 funding initiatives have come into my inbox. The request for application, RFA, from the Chancellor's office, but just as a general call out to California Community College Academic Senate presidents, not specifically to us. One is the Invention and Inclusive Innovation I3 funding opportunity. The letter for interest is due in February. This one specifically is funding for California community colleges to increase representation in STEM disciplines. I am very excited about it. However, previous attempts at talking about this with the deans were not be able to happen because of so much COVID considerations and campus starting. And so, well, there was a really great webinar on it, and anyone interested in pursuing this can check it out in the Vision Resource Center. The webinar is posted there. It's not something I think that the Senate can lead the work around. So if others are interested in this, I would say look into it and pursue it, especially those in STEM or CTE programs. But because there wasn't the opportunity to discuss it with the deans and that level of planning, I'm just not seeing it gonna happen for us. I just wanted to let everybody know that it exists, because if we can't do it this year, maybe people would be interested in it in the future. Another one that came my way, a request for applications, was the Rising Scholars Network from the Chancellor's office. If you're not familiar with Rising Scholars, that's what the Chancellor's office has dubbed many of the justice involved students or formerly incarcerated student programs. That request for application for development of programs is in March. So if this is something that the Senate or faculty do want to see happen, I would ask senators or faculty to let Senate steering members know so that we can agendize this for perhaps February. It's my personal opinion that while these are incredibly important things and very interesting and would dovetail nicely with things that we already have on our campus, there's just so many hours in the day. So I'm just worried about who will take the lead on these. And so if somebody's interested, let me know and I will get you all that information or let Senate steering know. Okay, what else? The State Academic Senate, the Academic Senate of California Community Colleges, the ASCCC, has finalized their 2-year report. And they have launched a new website. So any of you interested in what's happening at the state level, please check out there. Along those same lines, we'll have an agenda item for this probably in February, maybe early March. But the 2022 spring plenary has been announced. Again, it will be a hybrid event. The dates are April 7th through the 9th. The location is the Marriott in Los Angeles at Burbank. This time around, instead of having one fee to attend virtually and another for in-person, they're having a flat fee of $495 for anyone that wants to attend. So obviously we will need to send some leadership there, to participate in things like resolution, voting, as well as, getting the information from this important event and bringing it back to campus. But with that high fee for everyone, we do need to look at our budget and make a careful consideration of who we can send. Again, if you've gone before, let me say this differently. If you haven't gone to a plenary before, this is a great opportunity for you to be exposed to lots of things happening at the state level and also have a really quick experience in a leadership role for our Senate and important information sharing. So we'll plan on our proxy vote for the resolutions and planning around this later, but I just wanted to put it out there now so that people knew the dates. There's also a part-time institute happening February 10th and 11th, sponsored by the State Academic Senate. So I'll specifically forward this to Anna and Tricia, but everybody, all senators should encourage the part-time faculty in their divisions to attend. It's free. Lots of really important information and lots of opportunities for connecting. What's it called when you talk to people?
Networking.
That. Networking. That's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Tara. Okay. The Senate sponsored anti-racism hiring procedures and processes is going to pick up again in February. The 3 mandatory anti-racism hiring training webinars are happening. Again, Dr. Murillo hired somebody from Q, that Urban Center for Equity out of USC. Specifically, she hired Dr. Estella Ben-Simone to give these mandatory trainings. I'm really excited for so many of us on campus to engage in that important work. And I'm also excited for the changes that will develop in our hiring processes and just the changes to our norms on campus to come out of that. So that's getting started in February. Couple more things. The few of us, the 5 of us that were participating in the Long Beach City College cultural curriculum audit have finalized those meetings with our LBCC colleagues. And Josh Ramirez, myself, Tara, Melinda Gandara, and Rob Brown, and Justina Buller had a quick conversation, and it's decided that we're gonna come to Senate and share out all the good things that we learned there so that Senate can not only know about what we did, but also perhaps make some recommendation for similar training and processes to happen, whether that happens through our curriculum processes at CAC or another important place. So that will be coming to Senate probably February, maybe early March. I believe I reported on this last time, as did Dr. Kathy Scott, but we are moving forward with the credit for prior learning initiative. Kathy and I and Paloma, Dean Paloma Arnold, have been working on a solicitation to have a faculty lead. So that will come out soon. If you know anyone that is a veteran themselves, although I haven't been able to find a full-time faculty member that is a veteran, or is from a military family, or is just interested in supporting veterans, please encourage them to apply for this. It's going to be really important work. If you haven't already done so, please attend the budget forums. Rudy Hill has another one scheduled Thursday, January 28th, 9:30 to 10:30. Lots of really important stuff is happening in terms of budgets. So the more you know now, the less you will be surprised later. And when I say surprised, I don't mean a happy surprise. Also, 2 more things I want to share with you. Thursday, January 28th, I am the liaison, of course, to the Board of Trustees. At their meeting, the board approved a proposal from a company called Chancellor. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Chancellor, perhaps. An LA-based company, for the development of Sbcc's strategic plan. So previously, this has been done through solely or almost entirely shared governance processes. So this is a little different for us. That being said, if you go to the board agenda for January 20th, you will see that this particular firm has had lots of experience in the last 5 years or so working with other California community colleges on their strategic plans. There seems to be lots of opportunity to pull in stakeholders, have conversations, do that planning.
Sorry, could you say that again? Sorry.
That was Siri. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think with so much happening on campus and the bandwidth that we all have to put into things, I am really looking forward to working with this company and having them draw on experience for what they did at other community colleges. Although it does feel a little odd that, you know, an outside company is doing that for us, but I'm looking at it with definitely an optimistic attitude, and I think it will be good. The last thing I want to mention to you all is, again, as liaison from the board to the Senate and the Senate to the board, or rather the faculty body to the board, really. It's always important for our faculty to understand what's happening at the board and what's happening in our community. There was, the board decided this past year to create subcommittees again. We had them previously. They went, you know, to the side in the last few years, so they recreated them this year. There was a facilities and community relations subcommittee meeting on December 22nd. The subcommittee members for this particular committee is Veronica Guerrero, Peter Hasland, and Robert Miller. And I definitely would encourage senators to watch this meeting, and also to encourage faculty in your divisions to watch this meeting. I hope, again, it's not a surprise to anyone. We are planning on going out for a bond. And so there is important conversations happening about that. I hope that we are all behind a bond measure for this college. We desperately need it in a lot of different ways. So I hope that we can all, as individuals, not as professionals, but as individuals, be a champion for that. But also I think that it's important for you all to know what is happening at the board and what is being said by community members and our own trustee members. So again, the meeting that I'd like you to take a look at is December 22nd. It's posted on YouTube. And please listen to it when you can and when you are in a good headspace. The last thing I want to say is, last time the Senate voted to have requests for faculty positions not have different labels, replacement versus new. And I said that I would create a memo and I would share it with the Senate. There's just not enough hours in the day. So that memo has not been created, and that's why I am not sharing it with you all this week. So maybe in February, God willing, wish me luck, I will have that to share with you all, but right now that does not exist. So it hasn't been sent anywhere. I know I sound like a lot of us these days. That concludes my Senate report for today, unless there's clarifying questions, and if so, I welcome them, but if not, we can move on to our liaison reports. So hand raise for our senators for clarifying questions for me, or should any of our liaisons want to give an oral report now, please raise your virtual hand. I'm seeing no virtual hands at all from anyone. So I think that means our liaisons will not give an oral report. Okay, right on, just making sure. Which brings us to our Executive Vice President report. Kathy, it's yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray. Hi, everybody. I won't take long. There's a couple of things. Firstly, it's been really nice seeing faculty and students and staff on campus. It's been really pretty out. I walk around every day and look at the ocean. Maybe all of you are used to being here, but I'm really not used to it yet. But it's been really beautiful, and it's been nice seeing the students, and the student leadership was here this morning. They've got things planned for students to have more activities on campus. That's been really important to them. What's my next thing? I did want to say in response to the, what was it, Ray? The Rising Scholars, is that Student Services is applying for that. It's to make permanent a reentry grant that we got in 2019. So that's good and that's exciting. I agree with what you said about the budget update. I thought that was very informative today. If people have a chance to go on Friday or to listen to a recording of it, I think it's helpful. And then I wanted just to give you another little brief update, because I guess this is my thing in life, dropping students. Ow! All right, so we dropped about 550 students prior to January 18th. Those were the students that were in classes that started the week of the 18th. About 100 were dropped the morning of the 18th because students kept, in some cases, re-enrolling. Then we dropped 59 students that were given ad codes, which I think you all saw. And we're still continuing to drop. The big thing at the moment is dropping the students in those classes that start the week of February 22nd. There had been over 700 students on that list. There's now about 450. We are double checking the student list with the students who have uploaded their documentation into Cleared 4. Cleared 4 and Banner aren't in sync yet. So we have to check manually to see if they were put into Cleared 4, and then we take them off the list. So that's where we are. Faculty can submit, can continue to give out ad codes through Saturday, January 29th, but we're hoping that they don't do it too late, because Bea has agreed, and thank you, Bea, I don't know if she's here, but she's agreed to be looking at your Google Forms to see if these students have their vaccine record uploaded through Saturday. So, but I don't really want her to be doing that all day on Saturday up until midnight. So the earlier she gets that information, the easier it will be for her. And I know Christina's been helping with that too. And that's where we are. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say for today. And I'm hoping to get to other things in life besides COVID. It's really, really old at this point. It's old and it's new all at the same time, right? So that's it. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I think we are all there with that. There was no requests for any agenda items for the Senate to consider. So that concludes our communications section of our agenda. Which brings us to our consent agenda. So I did not hear from the chair of our Senate subcommittee faculty. I feel like a goldfish. I can't ever remember what I'm trying to say. Sabbatical leave and faculty recognition committee. There we go. Darren Gerard. So I do not believe that there, oh, Jenny's hand is up. Go ahead, Jenny Baxton. You are the liaison to that, so help me out. You're muted.
I can't see myself.
There you go.
We just met yesterday afternoon and there were no nominations. And so that is my only update that I have. So we couldn't discuss anything about it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so on the agenda under the consent item, I didn't hear from Darren. Jenny is the liaison. So this confirms my suspicion that there were no nominations. So SBCC will not have a nomination this year for the Stand Back Stroud Diversity Award. And the other item on our consent agenda is the appointment of Tara Carter as the interim CAC chair for this spring semester. So as I understand it, the committee met, discussed, said yeah. And so here it is on our Senate consent agenda. So officially we will remove item 6.2 nomination for the Stand Back Stroud Diversity Award because there is no nomination, and we have one item on our consent agenda, which is item 6.3, Tara Carter, appointment to the CAC chair in an interim role for this spring. So remember, the way our consent agendas work is that if you would like to discuss it, we pull it from the consent agenda and put it at the end of our agenda for discussion. If we want to approve the agenda, we approve it as a batch. There's only one item for approval. Somebody makes a motion to approve the consent agenda. Someone seconds it. There's no discussion. And then we do a roll call vote. So senators, what is your pleasure for today's consent agenda? Robin, you know?
To approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Robin. Is there
I'll
a
second it.
Trisha Matone seconds it. Thank you, Robin and Trisha. For the roll call vote, you can vote yes or yay, no or nay, or you may abstain. Benjamin Reyes,
Yes.
Counselor Jen,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Jenny,
Yes.
Joy, Joy Kuntz, Dee Dee,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
Robbie,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Trisha,
Yes.
and Anna.
Yes.
I vote yes. This is Joy, sorry. I couldn't find my mute thing. Anyway,
Thanks, Joy. We got your vote recorded. All right, so that is unanimous. Both congratulations and condolences to Tara. Okay. Thank you, Tara, for being willing to take on this important role. Okay, so we do have that timed item 7.1. So Joyce will be joining us at 3:50 p.m. So we'll come back to this timed item. And I'd love for us to get item 8.1 wrapped up and done, but it's possible that it doesn't. So if there's anyone here that would like to give public comment on item 8.1, addressing the incident of anti-Semitism, please indicate now by raising your virtual hand. If not, we will go to this agenda item. Okay, so this has been on our agenda several times now. Last meeting, I shared that I would finalize our language in the resolution. And I shared it with senators for what I hoped was going to be wordsmithing on the shared Google Doc in real time. And then we can consider the language and hopefully finally approve this and move forward with the contents. There we go. Took me forever to get my Google Doc up. So let me share that with you all, switching over. Okay, so here is the language cleaned up a bit. I saw no comments or edits suggested. If there's any in this meeting now, we can handle them. The whereases, the first couple were cleaned up a bit. I wanted to soften the language around that a swastika is a symbol of the Nazi movement, which is viewed by many as swastikas, like many symbols, have been appropriated away from its original symbolism. And so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too definitive in excluding major world religions and other beliefs. So that's that. Whereas everything else is mostly the same, except for the 2 resolves that we discussed me adding last time, which was the Senate will arrange for professional development to be provided around freedom of speech in the classroom and on campus. And then also those resources being curated and created for faculty so that we have resources to turn our students to if they experience a hate crime or just bigoted language at them, and also information for discussion points in classes. So that's what we have. All I've done thus far is introduce the item. So we can go about this different ways. What I would like to recommend to the Senate is, because we've discussed this many times, to be a little expedient in our work tonight. Robert's Rules of Order says to typically have a motion around an action item, a second, and then discussion. So rather than having discussion and then a motion and then maybe more discussion, my recommendation now is to have the motion and the second, and then our discussion points. So looking for someone to kick us off.
Me, Anna, and I move to approve the resolution.
Okay, so there's been a motion made by our Vice President,
I'll second.
Ana Garcia, a second by Robin Goodnow. Okay. So our discussion. And if there is none, we can move to a roll call vote. Discussion. I'm hearing and seeing none. Okay. Our roll call vote. Ben Reyes.
Yes.
Counselor Jen.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Jenny.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Dee Dee.
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Robin.
Yes.
Jess.
Yes.
Robbie.
Yes.
Ruth.
Yes.
Tara.
Yes.
Russell.
Yes.
Trisha.
Yes.
And Anna.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all so much for your contributions to our discussion and your participation in the vote. We will have this resolution finalized, removing the drafts, and posted on our Academic Senate website. And then also I will be working with our faculty professional development lead, Justina Buller, and Tara at PDAC, thinking about getting professional development around freedom of speech considerations in our classrooms. Also working with many of the same, as well as anybody else that would like to develop the materials, the curated materials. And then of course, Anna, myself, and others for procedure and policy development. So more on that to come. Very important step. Appreciate everyone's work on that resolution. All right, so item 8.2, inclusive access and class materials. I'll call for public comment. Would anybody like to provide public comments on this item? If so, please indicate as much by raising your virtual hand. Okay. And I'm not seeing any. So background information. This agenda item was originally added to our agenda after a request made by our ESD senator, one of them, Chancellor Jennifer Hamilton, and Ana Garcia wanted the same, and as a Senate, we decided to agendize this, and so that is where the conversation started. At the time, our liaison, Jenny Baxton, was discussing inclusive access through the bookstore, and at that time, there was some confusion amongst us as a Senate and faculty and the campus of what is inclusive access. Recall that CAC approved mandatory class fees, for instance, specifically for the School of Modern Language classes. I believe at least French, Italian, and Spanish, maybe just Spanish and Italian, I can't remember exactly which. And that was also being called inclusive access. And so there was confusion because when CAC has mandatory class fees, it is charged differently to students than inclusive access through the bookstore. So there was a lot of nomenclature, a lot of jargon to get through. Very thankful for the representatives from the bookstore that came, especially Cindy Rogers, who's been available to us many times, helping us navigate this, as well as Nicole Hubert from Student Accounts Fiscal Services, to get some information about this. There is a resolution that has been posted on our Senate agenda since, way back in early December. When it was originally posted, we said we're not going to take any action on this at this first meeting. Didn't want to slip it past faculty or something like that. We wanted to make sure that we were giving this a lot of thought, thinking about unintended consequences, getting feedback, getting input, making sure it was right. And we haven't really discussed it since. So the resolution for, Senate work to be born out of this conversation is here for our review, our editing, our adjusting, our approval, our discussion. And yeah, so I think that's about it for my background and introduction on this item. And before we start discussing this, I would like to see if Joyce was able to join the meeting yet. And she is here. And so we have that timed item of the COVID back to campus planning. So I know that it's abrupt and a shift here and a shift there in terms of what we're talking about, where, when, and why, and on our agenda. But Joyce is here and she's super busy and it's a timed item as such. So I'm going to kick it over to Joyce to give us her presentation on return to campus and COVID modifications for the spring semester. And yeah, so Joyce, thank you so much for taking the time and offering to be here and talking to faculty about all of the important things that are happening around COVID on our campus. Joyce, would you like to share your screen at all, or are you just going to speak with us?
No, I'm just going to give a short 3-minute talk, and I mainly want to have you ask me questions that you need answered. One concern that I hear from faculty is, what if a student does this? Or what if a student doesn't wear their mask, or they take their mask off constantly, and those kinds of things? And my response has always been, use the student code of conduct when you need it. You know, typically, I know many faculty will write in their, hopefully in their syllabus this semester, you got to follow the rules of the campus around immunization and requirements. And if you tell the student in your syllabus that you expect them to wear an approved mask on campus, to come on campus with a wristband, and they don't do that, then you have the student code of conduct available to do a referral. It's the faculty's right to ask the student to leave the classroom. And then you do the maximum student code of conduct referral, and the dean, the associate dean, assistant dean, takes it from there. But that's one of the biggest concerns that I hear from faculty in email. What do I do if? And I just simply say, if you set that standard from the very beginning, it won't happen more than 1 or 2 times. That was the biggest thing that I had coming to you, that I hear, like I say, at least twice a week from somebody when it comes to the faculty. And instead of me sending the emails constantly, I just wanted to say, use the student code of conduct. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about what if, when the student does this, what should I do? But essentially, that was my biggest point that I wanted to make. And again, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have around what we're doing with the COVID response team. Or even student code of conduct. I've been a student code of conduct officer at 3 different colleges in 3 different states. So I have lots of experience with that.
Thank you, Joyce. Questions? Robbie?
Yeah, I've had a couple of students test positive, and and it's not uncommon for people who test positive to remain testing positive on the PCR test for quite a long time, well past the time when, for instance, the CDC says you can stop quarantining. And so I wonder if the COVID response team is considering some exception to the rule for cases like that. Like if somebody tested positive and they quarantined for X number of days, do they then get a waiver? Or is there some, I wonder if anybody is thinking about how to address that, or do we have to just, you know, juggle students who are absent for potentially weeks at a time?
No, Dr. Fisher. And I've seen
just Robbie, I'm not a doctor, but
oh no, I saw you at the testing station. You're not a doctor, okay? So I'm not either. So the COVID response team sent to PC a draft on Sunday around giving those students, like CDC says, a 90-day exemption where they don't have to test. And that form should be going out. I believe Martha's team is developing something today around that goes out in the email format and the newsletter. But we recognize it and we're addressing it, and they have to work with the COVID response contact tracing team, and they put them on a 90-day notification and clear for where, and then when the 90 days are up, they have to resume testing. But we've also ordered some antigen tests, and of course, we don't know when they're coming. 3,000 of them, with that in mind, that because the antigen test will provide a different kind of result than the PCR test around someone who's been tested positive for COVID.
That's really great to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so nothing else because I've got to dash off. We're training testers to work at the testing tables last week and this week. Every week we're training a new set of people. They've got to do 4 hours of training with me 2 hours of training with the scientists, and then they spend another 6 to 8 hours hands-on experience at the tables testing. So I have a group that's on campus this afternoon to do that initial training with me around the college protocols and policies. Because our goal is when all of our colleagues return on the 22nd to have Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. testing at all 3 sites. On Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at all 3 sites. And then on Saturdays, at some testing both at shot and weight.
Kathy?
Yeah, I just wanted to make clear one thing that may not be clear. Prior to February 22nd, the students do have to come, the students who are starting back on February 22nd, they have to come in the week before and get tested. And right after, we wanted to wait until all this drop information was done before we went into the next thing. But they will be getting a notice that just to remind them that they have to get tested prior to that week. And the same would hold for faculty who may not be back on campus until that week of February 22nd. They need to come in the week before and also get tested. So information will be coming out about that, but I just figured I would take this opportunity to tell people that has to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Tricia?
Yes, regarding the rapid tests, the ones where students can get tested there and find out their results kind of while they're standing there, so to speak. Are there plans, or is it possible to have a couple of those, say, over at the non-credit campus? Because there are students who are enrolling all the way through the term, and sometimes there's like blocks to their enrollment, or they have difficulty. And the thought of a student coming to class, a one-day class, or a student who wasn't able to get tested to their schedule, coming and then being turned away from class. If there's an alternative where they can still get tested that day and go to class, I think that would be more student-centered if possible. So I was just wondering why that's not an option.
A couple things. The antigen test has just recently become readily available to the public. Secondly, if we make that an option at Wake or Shot, and in the sake of equity, we need to make it available at all the sites. So that's a question that's bigger than me. I'm sure that we'll have the conversation and shared governance in different formats before we make any decision about those kinds of things. Because once we decide, if we decide we're going to use antigens, then the next question is how and when. Do I get to take one at home and just pop in with it and say, oh, here's my test? So there's a lot of thought that has to really go into this if we're going to do it. So it's not that I'm saying, no, we're not going to do it. I'm saying that there will be discussion around how we do it so we can be equitable and fair and ensure that people are still safe.
Thank you.
Russell, and then Anna, and Joyce, if you need to go, we understand, but if you can stay just a few more minutes, that would be awesome.
Okay, I'll stay.
Sorry, I don't know what I was trying to unraise my hand and I clicked something else, just spastic mouse. It can't be me, right? It's got to be the mouse. Sorry for that. Just quick question. So I'm already in person, as are my students. Smaller than normal class sizes, obviously we're 80%. And yet students are coming in with a common refrain that they are in line for a significant period of time, trying to check in, and they're significantly late. Now, obviously, I'm in the classroom. I'm not seeing this. If anybody else is in person, I'd love to hear that. And if this is true, what will we do come February 22nd when there are a lot more?
Russell, can you clarify for me? Did you mean the testing line?
No, just to check in. So in
Oh.
other words, we've got to walk in, flash a little blue screen, right? Grab a mask if we don't have one, and then get to class.
So I'm in person, and so are all of my students. And So I'm on campus and so are they, and that has not been my experience at all.
Okay, so I'm admin building and that little tent kind of right at the bridge. So like I said, I'm in classroom myself and I have, the students that I have. So nobody else has experienced this. If not, then I'm just gonna tell them.
It could be
Okay.
time of day, right? Because my student was in line, this again, this is not credit, the first day for an hour before he was able to come to class. But then it was really, really fast after that. So maybe it's time of day, maybe it is location, maybe it's, because they didn't have enough staffing last week. That's my thoughts.
I don't know. I'm 8 a.m. Monday through Friday.
Yeah, and that's when I'm on campus. So that's when my students start lab. It hasn't been an issue for my students.
Fair enough. Then
Last week
then
we were slower and
there's no fire.
We're getting faster, and once we go back to the 22nd, we'll have more tables open. Currently, we only have the health administration table open and the bridge table, the library, and the roundabout to meet the needs that we have. And the athletics is always open. So, but we'll go back to the bookstore being open. We'll go back to student services being open, and we're hoping that more people will have logged into Clear 4 and understand the process by then, because we're saying to be able to test, you have to be in Clear 4. So that's getting them into Clear 4 and hopefully moving them along. But the staff have been trained on how to use the iPad. I'm at the tables, shot, wait, and over here different days and different times to see what the problems are and try to address them. And the staff also has my phone number and Reenie's phone number. If someone's at the table who they can't help, they can call us. If we're not in a meeting, we will reach out. Otherwise, they go to the hotline to get help. So we're hoping that this soft rollout, with some of us coming back soon in January and everybody else coming back in February, has been a blessing, and we can resolve many problems before people come back. I'm knocking on wood as I say that, because you know how technology will damn you in a minute.
Anna?
Yeah, hi Joyce. I first want to say thank you, and I think most things have been pretty smooth from what I have heard. So I know that that's been a huge undertaking, and I just want to make sure that you're appreciated for the amount of labor and all the things that need to be coordinated for this process. And then I had kind of a two-part question.
Okay.
My first part of the question is, you mentioned the antigen tests and how they provide different results. And I'm just wondering if you could explain what you mean by that. And then the second part is, there's so much information that's constantly coming through, and I know that you're kind of staying up on what that is and adjusting our process to that. And I'm wondering if there is a plan for disseminating some of the information that we are using to like create our response plan, to make sure that people understand like where the information is coming from and can stay educated and up to date, I guess, because as someone
Okay.
is in there, it's hard for me, so I'm sure it's hard for others, and I'm just curious in the plans.
So when it comes to answering the tests and those kind of things, I defer to our professional experts that we hired to do that. So I don't answer those questions about what's the difference, because I don't know. I know what I know, but I don't know enough about it to share that with you. Martha's team, executive director for communication, is working on, is now working closer with our team to develop and deliver the e-newsletter. And we're going to make sure that information is flowing that way. Reedy, our newest COVID coordinator, has been charged with working with the webmaster to update the website so we can push people to the website. So when you have a question, you can typically go to the website and find an up-to-date answer and not have to email us and wait on a response for us. We're trying our hardest to get it all out there and make it public and transparent, so you'll easily know what to do when, kind of thing. And you know, it changes all the time with CDC, but our newest coordinator came from the Department of Public Health in the county and has 2 years of experience with the COVID response team. So she brings a different level of expertise than Tim, who brings the clinical perspective, and Eva, who brings the contact tracing component. So, and I'll get somebody on our team to respond to that in the newsletter.
Okay.
If not this week, probably because it goes out tonight, but next week for sure. Okay.
Okay, that would be super helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Joyce.
My pleasure. And you guys feel free to text, email, or call me on my cell phone. If I can be of service. I'm a early morning and late night email answer these days. So if you get an email response at 1 o'clock, I don't want to hear about it, okay? Thank you. It's good meeting some of you at the tables. Put the real person to the name, but I'm here to help in any way I can. So thank you for having me, Rayanne.
Yes, thanks for coming, Joyce. All right, take care. We'll see you
Okay,
again.
bye-bye. I certainly will. Bye-bye.
And as a reminder to our faculty and Senate, the more pedagogical pieces for instructional faculty that you need to grapple with. How do I handle a student that has to be out for 3 weeks? How do I, manage my class when there might be a significant number out? What are some best practices around clear and consistent communication? All of that for the instructional faculty will be discussed in that FIG that Justina and Buller and I will be co-chairing, co-leading this spring. So if you haven't already expressed your interest in doing so, please let us know this week so that we can start scheduling it. It's specifically for instructional faculty, and I just want to let everybody know why was it created or where did that come from? As Senate President sitting at the Senate, I heard a lot of discussion and a lot of instructional faculty grappling with this. And I also went to FPSS where there was a conversation there and why isn't there support and we need support and all of this. So all I did was call up Dean Elizabeth Imhoff and say, hey, maybe we could do this work in a FIG. Is there funding for this? So I'm just mentioning it so that others are aware of where that came from, how it came about. And should anyone else out there want to lead a FIG and have a proposal, we have grants on campus and we know who to ask for that. And you are very much welcome to lead that effort and just feel empowered to do so. So yay. Okay, Robbie.
Would it be helpful for a quick explanation of what Joyce meant when she said the tests were different?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I say no. You really want to though, right? Okay, go ahead.
No, really, it's fine.
Okay. That's not 10+1, so you can get that to Anna. Okay, right on. Trisha?
I just want to clarify. So the FIG that you were talking about, that's mainly going to be geared towards credit faculty, correct then?
So it is grant funded and non-credit faculty cannot participate in grant funded activities.
Okay, so when you're also, okay, and then when you were talking about if we wanted to start another one and you were saying there's funding available for that, what you just said also applies?
So I don't have a grant. I don't run the grant. I don't know the rules.
Okay, I'll double check later.
I'm sure if non-credit faculty wanted to implement a FIG, that there are administrators who have access to funding that could support that. And so I don't think an access to grant should prohibit or exclude you from requesting that.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Coming back to item 8.2, inclusive access and class materials. So I know we're completely shifting gears again. But at this point, what else needs to be said by the Faculty Senate on the topic of class materials for students, where they are accessed, who profits from them, who, I don't know, other questions, other statements starting with W's. Jenny.
So since this conversation's taken place over a long span of time, and I just want to make sure everything is out there for clarity, based on the public comments we heard, I just want to clarify that when professors have students pay for private access to things like a personal website, promise grants and EOPS grants do not cover those expenditures. So I want to make sure I'm correct in that and that it's on the record. And I also wanted to ask about or confirm that if a student were to pay for, let's say, access to a private website for a class that they need to take, but then they choose to drop it within the first 2 weeks, they do not receive a refund for those materials or access like they would through the bookstore. So I believe the answers to those things are yes, but those are concerns I think to emphasize as part of this discussion.
Yeah, so let me add some clarifying points. So your first question was about if you have, if you have private access to something like a website and it's not through the bookstore, students, the grants can't pay for it. Okay, 2 exceptions to that I'm aware of. One, if your website is called a journal, or even if not, you can sell access codes to your website through the bookstore, and then those grants can be used towards it. The second clarifying point is whether or not it's a legit textbook or a person's website or blog or other materials. If it's not through the bookstore and the teacher just sends you a link, even if it's to a legitimate publisher, it's my understanding that EOPS, CARE, CalWORKs, all of those funding and the promise can't pay for it. So I think that's an important distinction because, for instance, it was shared with me that there was a textbook required of students in one of the School of Modern Language classes this semester. It was through a publisher. The direct link to the mandatory textbook was given to students, but it never went through the bookstore. And so, as Christina was mentioning, can't just pay for that. So whether it's a website or a textbook, if it's not through the bookstore, can't just be like, I need $100 for this thing, right? There's not a process for that. And if your website or blog is through the bookstore, it can be covered that. So I think the conversation around that point is actually what does it mean when we have a personal website that has pay per access only, that's not edited or reviewed by others, that is being required by a professor in a class where that professor is the recipient of the money for the access and is requiring it of students. So I think that's the conversation there. The other thing I want to share with you was one other point. What was the other point? Okay, so not only if students purchase an access code to a website or some non-tangible course material, and then they withdraw from the course, if they use that access code, they do not get a refund, even if they drop the course. And it's actually a little bit worse than that. So there was an incident where a biology class that uses these access codes for the website was canceled by the college before the semester started due to low enrollment. A student had purchased the access code as, you know, as a required material. They were getting ready for their course, access code, started doing it, like got access, blah, blah, blah. Class was canceled by the college and they were not allowed a refund. And the student was quite upset by that. So I think I answered all of your questions and concerns. Ellen.
I was actually just going to bring up that last example that you provided, but I just want to emphasize it because I think it's extremely problematic for us to be charging students for something. And I believe for that biology class, it's like $100.
It's $100 through the bookstore. It's $80 if you use your private credit card to purchase it straight from the, I don't know whether it's the professor or the site itself.
And either way, the class is canceled. You've already purchased it. You don't get a refund. I think that's outrageous. I think it's problematic when it happens with commercial textbooks that may have an online access code component, and once that code is used, then the student can't get a refund for that either. So I think that's that I want to acknowledge that part of the issue, but I think when I guess what I'm saying is like that's not a perfect system either in my mind, but because basically that big publishing company is benefiting from that student's $100, and I would venture that the student could use that $100 a lot more than the publishing company. But if it's our faculty, I'm really uncomfortable with our faculty basically self-publishing material and then charging for it. And Ray, you mentioned this earlier, but in those kinds of scenarios, that material has not gone through the usual scholarly review types of processes. And you could argue that, well, my lectures don't go through that process either, but I'm not charging students for those beyond the fee for the course. And presumably I've been hired because I'm competent to teach this course, but it just feels like double dipping to me if I'm creating content for my course without any kind of review and then charging a student for that content. that's what I was hired to do. So
Well,
I think,
I was just going to say, I do think that there is an opportunity for peer review in your courses because we get evaluated.
I was just going to go there. Yeah. So like I'm getting evaluated on that aspect of my teaching, but yeah, anyway, I'll there's other hands up, I think, so I'll pause, but I have a lot to say on this. I just think it's reprehensible, honestly, that our faculty making what we make would be charging our students you know, $100 for a course that they end up not even being able to take because it's canceled. That's just criminal in my mind.
Thank you, Ellen. So I just want to focus our efforts on a couple of places that like Senate can own and discuss, right? So that like we have a way forward. So we have this resolution. And to me, there's different things that the Senate can do, not only with the resolution, but with this concept, okay? So one of the things that we must do is give guidance to CAC. So CAC temporarily approved mandatory class fees for the Manzana learning apps for different languages that is owned by a professor in School of Modern Language. And so he is the one that went to CAC and requested the approval through CAC for those mandatory fees. So we either need to give guidance to CAC to say yes, when there are requests like this, they can be approved through the curriculum process, or no, something like that needs to go through the bookstore. So there's different implications there, right? Is it through student billing and their account, right? Their tuition, their bill, or is it through the bookstore? Okay, so there's that aspect that we need to have a conversation around. Then there's the concept of, do we support faculty publishing materials and then monetarily benefiting from that by assigning them in their classes? And then there's the conversation around whether they are published by a publishing firm or self-published. So there's several different like areas in here that we need to grapple with and like come to a consensus on. Okay, Tara.
Yeah, so I'll put on my CAC hat. I wear a lot of hats, so I'll put on my CAC hat. And I really want to thank all of our senators here for actually providing some guidance to CAC on what has been a very thorny and challenging series of discussions that have happened at CAC. There have been 3 separate meetings about these instructional materials fees for the School of Modern Languages, primarily for Spanish and Italian. It's a $90 fee. And we have, of course, no objection to the instructors using those materials. I'm not an expert in teaching Spanish. I'm not there to evaluate the merit of the content of those materials. However, at CAC, we have strong concerns about calling these an instructional materials fee. Namely, our campus has very few material fees on purpose. And the reason why is that a student has to pay for those fees in order to register for the course. So it becomes an equitable issue, and $90 is not a small amount of money for most of our students. So we usually reserve it for something like in the art department, they have a few materials fees because we don't expect students to bring pounds of clay with them every time they come to class. And it's not a very a large amount of money. I think it's like $15. We have a few fees for like access to a golf course because we don't own a golf course. So those are fees that clearly make sense given the student handbook fees, which by the way has not been updated since 2012, which is why we're struggling, because now we're dealing with a set of materials that didn't exist in 2012. So for myself, if you look at the rules in the handbook, it feels like a loophole to be able to include these material fees for the School of Modern Languages as a course fee. And speaking from a pedagogical point of view, we have strong concerns over equity because again, students have to pay for it up front. And if this was a traditional textbook or even software for a course, students could share it with each other and split the cost. We often put things like that on reserve in our library for students to be able to use it. So there's been a strong push from CAC to support that material being sold through the bookstore instead. And it's my understanding that a number of meetings have happened, but it's also my understanding that it's not been resolved. There is still a series of meetings to come. And CAC, this is a 10+1 issue. I think for CAC, we would much prefer to not have this be a materials fee, to have it go through the bookstore like we do, so that we are providing options for students to have access to those materials. I'm sure there's more. I'm a little nervous because actually the meetings have been so hard. So I'm a little nervous even talking about it. But that is where I stand as the interim chair of CC. I would not be in support of renewing that policy to call it a materials fee. I would rather they go through the bookstore so that students have options. However, it's not really anything clearly spelled out in the student fee handbook, again, because it hasn't been updated in 10 years. And it's a local decision, right? So our college needs to decide what really constitutes a materials fee. Thanks.
Thank you, Tara. And I was present for one of the conversations. It was really tense and really awful. And yeah, it's been hard. And this is hard work. And we need to center students in our conversations, which is why I highlighted the Senate value I did today. And I also think that we do need to come up with some kind of recommendation for CAC so that it's the concept. How do we think about this philosophically so that we can develop general policy, procedure, language around this that centers students. So if everybody looks at the resolution in front of us up for consideration, that's what we should be, focusing our efforts around so that it's resolved by the Senate where we stand on this. The other thing I'd like to share is that that fishbowl thing is happening again. I can't remember. It will come to me, probably in the middle of Ellen's sentence. So Ellen, why don't you go? And I really want to encourage all senators to speak up about this. We are on the edge of academic freedom here. Okay, we're talking about policing course materials. Okay, so this should perk your ears up. We're talking about holding each other accountable for who is profiting off of these materials. We're talking about that after years of being online and doing lots of stuff for not pay, right? We're talking about some really, really important stuff here. So I just want to encourage everyone to engage in this conversation. I also want to recognize that these conversations aren't tough just at CAC. We are potentially affecting people's bottom line, their income. In the case of the biology access to the website, it's my understanding that it's upwards of $37,000 a year, right? For access to this website. We're talking real money. Manzana Learning, the board agenda item paid Manzana Learning $90,000 according to the requisition. We're talking about a significant amount of money here for each other. And this is a really hard conversation for us as a Senate. It's been a really hard conversation for years, I think, on this campus. And there's been lots of whispers, and this person's doing this, and you can do this way, and you can do that, right? So here's our opportunity to engage in important work that directly affects our students, centering them, having an open, honest conversation around topics that we all may feel very differently about and have different experiences and different viewpoints. Probably if, you know, anyone in this meeting that has published their own material is thinking about how little they got for that and what are we talking about here, right? This is a really big concept. So I just want to engage the whole Senate. You all come from different disciplines. You all have different experiences around this. This treads on certain different parts of your professional life. So please, let's have a really in-depth, open, honest conversation around this. Ellen, and then Russell.
I just wanted to quickly clarify something about the library course reserves. That's an issue not just with material that our faculty members are creating, but a commercial textbook that has an online access code component. We can lend out that physical textbook through our course reserves, but not the online access code. So that's often an issue for students. They don't purchase it from the bookstore. They come to the library thinking they can have access to everything they need for the class, and they only have the physical textbook, not the website where they're doing, you know, assignments or whatever. So that's an issue too.
And before Russell goes, I thought what I wanted to share, so I want to just mention it really quickly. I think one way of thinking about these required course materials is as follows. So let's say you are entering a department where an instructor that teaches the same course that you are hired has authored the textbook. You are adjunct, they are tenured, they have been here for decades. You are now teaching the course. This person is probably going to be your evaluator. This person might have say over whether or not the class is offered and you get to teach it again, right? So this isn't just the power dynamics, I think, of instructor-student and access to materials. I also think this affects the power dynamics within our own departments. And so if that newly hired part-time adjunct doesn't want to use your textbook, how might that flavor your interactions with them, right? So just something to think about in all of this as well. Russell?
Yeah, okay. At the end of the day, the person standing in front of the room is the content area expert. And in all the classes I've taken, I have benefited from purchasing the textbook that the person in front of me wrote. It's helped immensely with the class. Within our department, Tim Gillis, retired professor emeritus, wrote the textbook that we are still using. The issue I have is it's course materials versus a textbook that you're required to buy. And I think that is really what it comes down to. And so it sounds to me as if CAC, years ago, based on the arguments made, were slightly waived in favor of, yes, right now it makes the most sense for this to be a materials fee. We approve it with reservations. It sounds like moving forward, that will probably not be the case. So I'm not sure that we need a resolution if I'm hearing the representatives from CAC correctly, right? Maybe we resolve that, hey, if it's a textbook or a textbook-like medium in which we're conveying information, that it goes through the bookstore and it is listed as, right, any other required text, but it's not a fee that you pay for when you register. So those are my 2 cents.
So perhaps the language could be if it's content, if it's exercises, if it's something like that, it's going to the bookstore. But if it's like a consumable or access, like to a golf course, then it would be a materials fee, a course fee.
Absolutely, yes. And we have clear precedent across campus. It's not as if this is gonna, where are we gonna find the niche?
Thank you for that, Russell. Other opinions? Kathy?
Thank you. I've been dealing with this issue at several institutions, and I have a hard time with it as well. But there's one thing I want us to consider, because I actually got in a fight with a publisher in the middle of a quad one day over this issue. A lot of publishers want to go this route. They want to put it in this way so that they get more students to buy the book. And there's this opt-out issue. And I don't know if you've discussed that, but students have to opt out, otherwise they're automatically charged. And the benefit to the students from the publisher's point of view is that it lowers the textbook prices substantially. And if we allow it to go through as a materials fee, and the students have to opt out, many, many, many more students end up with the book, which I guess is good in one sense, but then they can't share, they can't go to the library, they can't do any of these other things. So it's really a trade-off, and the publishers are really pushing this down the college's throats in many cases because their numbers are dwindling from OER and all kinds of other things, and just the pressure for faculty to lower textbook prices. I still don't like it. I just don't. It feels wrong. But I think we have to look at the costs, and I don't know, just there's a lot of publishers that are doing this. I didn't even know they were doing it at one institution where I was at. Anyways, there's just that side of it too. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kathy. And I think specifically you're discussing inclusive access, which is another part of this conversation. So inclusive access, you can opt out. So that's the one that's like integrated into your Canvas shell, and you can opt out of that. The School of Modern Language one that's through the course fee at the college. Why am I waving my arms around so much? I don't know. I feel like it helps with explaining. So I'll stop that. That one, as I understand it, the process to opt out is much more involved and is not at all easy. So yeah, there's the issue of opting out with inclusive access. And then there's this materials fee, which is a whole nother trying to opt out. Yeah. Really, really heavy stuff here. Robbie?
I hope other people chime in too. I feel two main things I want to say. One is that it's hard to argue with the position of the AAUP, where they strongly suggest against even any appearance of impropriety in this regard, in the regard of professors authoring and profiting from their own stuff. I mean, it's hard to argue with them, right? So there's that. I have to, as a senator, I have to be honest and represent my division. And I have to say that there have been a few voices in my division in support of professors writing their own stuff, but only a few. And it seemed really clear to me that their arguments had very obvious counter arguments, like, in order to do this fancy stuff, I needed to buy a fancy computer because it's faster than the one the school provided, and I had to do that with my own money. And these arguments that I've heard like that just don't hold water. So if we vote on this, despite the fact that the conversation in my department by a few has been dominated by a few people who support this idea, I will be voting against, well, I will be voting that the Senate recommend to the CAC that we do not support this practice. And I'll just give you an anecdotal story that I've heard more than once, that there are professors out there who have authored their own textbooks and they're uncomfortable with the idea that they're profiting from it, and yet they feel it's the best book. And so they just donate their profits to their school or to some other worthy cause. And that's, of course, something we can't force anybody to do, but it's a really good example of what I think is the just way to look at this issue.
Well, what we could do is not force anyone to donate their profits, but what we could mandate through procedure and policy is that you do not profit from access to your textbook in your own class. So if you're like, you know, the best ever chemistry textbook writer, and all these other schools are using your textbook, you can make whatever money you want from them using the textbook, but you would sell your textbook at cost to our bookstore. And we can put that in procedure and policy. So we can do that. And I'm having a really hard time with this mention of, well, I needed to buy an expensive computer.
Yeah, me too.
I guess my question, Robbie, to you for your division conversation is, were those that would be directly affected by this decision the outspoken critics of it? And that can be a rhetorical question, you don't have to answer it. And then my other question is, philosophically, we should not dictate course materials for any courses. That is part of academic freedom. If the concept here is not instructors writing their own course materials, the content here is, if you write your own course materials, are you then allowed to profit off of it? That's where the Senate can have a discussion. So Elizabeth, Trisha, and then Jenny.
I just wanted to say people in our department were supportive of what you just said about how they're totally fine with them profiting from other classes, selling their books, just not their own class. So, yeah.
Cool, thanks. It's right on. Nice to know you had that conversation. Thanks. Trisha?
Yeah, I just was want to reference I think one of your initial comments about the law of unintended consequences. So if you know, the material, the $90 for the language learning materials that they created now has to go to the bookstore, does that mean then that students are going to have to pay 180 or whatever, a significant amount more because it goes to the big bookstore? And also then, is it somehow potentially harming students because not all of them will have the materials that they need to succeed on day one, like they would under the current system and under the new system? You're going to have students who are, don't have the materials because they're trying to, share it with somebody else, but it's one of those kind of materials that it's sort of like independent, especially language. So I was just wanted to bring that out. Is there what are the unintended consequences of banning this, aside from the ethics of profit?
I do not know the margins of profit for our SBCC bookstore off the top of my head, but I do know that they are very slim. So it would not go from 90 to 180. The access code from the professor who has a website going from personally 180 to 100 was that instructor's decision. So he charges the bookstore like that amount, and then that's what the bookstore charges. So I don't think that I don't think that the worry about the margin going up by a lot should be the equity conversation, because that's
Well, just, the reason I'm mentioning is because we at non-credit in adult high school used to buy our books sort of directly from things. And then when we had to go to the bookstore, the prices doubled. But again, they were low cost prices. So that's why I wondered why in the first place the instructors would have wanted to do it independently of the bookstore. There must have been maybe there isn't a reason why they would do it that way rather than go to the bookstore. And maybe the argument I remember, I'm on CAC too, was hearing that it saved their students money and it eliminated a lot of hassle for students. So that's kind of consideration, weighing that against, a student not getting a refund, maybe that seems like something that you could potentially build in, that if you are going to offer your own materials, you have to offer a refund. I don't know if that's something that you would have, that the school would have a rule for, but that was my 2 cents.
Thank you, Trisha. Jenny, and then Ruth.
One note from our department on the issue of a professor using their own book in their class and then perhaps receiving a profit from that. I know that we have at least one case of that in our department where we have a nationally renowned expert that we're fortunate to have who did publish a textbook through a recognized publisher, very vetted and well-known publisher. And a condition of them being able to publish the book is that they would use it for a particular time in their class, because they wanted to make sure that the faculty member was directly and presently interacting with students, which gave validity to the actual text. And many other people in our department were using the textbook as well. And I would say would have no problem with that being used, and especially going through a renowned publisher. So it was really specific to our campus and therefore very useful. So I personally, and from other people in our department that I've heard from, don't have a problem with the professor using their own text in their class. To me, the bigger issue is the equity issue, and that is access to course and materials, which is where I would put the focus. And that being the extra cost to students and the barrier that is presented when they can't access it using their book grants, fees that are not returned to them if a course is canceled or they drop it, fees that they didn't know about when registering, other hurdles to go through a private site using a private email, things like that, that are strictly access issues that harm students.
Thank you for your division's contributions to the conversation. Ruth?
I have a few points to make. When it's a fee imposed through, approved by CAC and imposed through billing, my big issue, or one of the big issues with that, is that this could potentially affect down the line their credit score, right? If they don't pay this, and a lot of our students do carry debt because they walk away, and for it to impact their credit score, which could potentially impact their employment because they, dropped a class, that's detrimental for years, potentially years to come. And I know there's the argument that they could just pay it and have it reversed, but they have to know to be active about that, right? To actually know the procedure of like, okay, I need to have them reverse this and take this off my credit, which they won't necessarily do. So that's one thing. The other thing about pricing, the concern that was brought about it being more expensive with going through the bookstore. So the bookstore does charge a markup, but I know the budgets. They are not making huge profits. And I just want to remind faculty, and I've said this plenty of other times, that we have bargaining power as faculty members. So if you are engaging with a publisher, I highly recommend you to negotiate with them, because you don't have to use their materials. And I've done it. I reduced the cost of my textbook from over $100 to $55. So it can be done, usually, especially with publishers who are willing, obviously. So that's another thing. The other issue that was brought up about e-access and the platforms and them being at the reserve. Most publishers that I worked with, and I'm in economics, so we have a lot of big name publishers, which everyone sees as these profit hungry companies, which I absolutely agree with. Even they provide access codes to my students. So if I come across a student who emails me and says, Professor Morales, I can't afford this, I find a way. I talk to my publisher up and I say, hey, I need a code for this student, And this can be done as well if the publisher is willing. And I know for a fact that the publisher that we keep on bringing up that had to go through CAC, that is now making $90,000 from the college, does not, because I was a CAC liaison when this came through, and I highly recommended to the CAC not to approve this as a fee. And then when I was asking questions, one of my questions was, what do you do when a student comes to you who says, I can't afford it? And the response to that was, oh, I send them to EOPS, or I send them to one of the book grants. And I'm like, this student is coming to you because they say they can't pay for it. If they're part of EOPS and they do get the book grants, then it would have already been covered, right? And it really bothered me, because here is, at the time, I didn't know that this was the actual owner of the company or someone who was involved in it, where it really bothered me that the answer wasn't, oh, we'll comp them, we'll figure out a way because we are pro-student. And then lastly, two things which are related. I totally agree with what Russell and Rayanne were talking about earlier about the tangible fee, fee for tangibles or for some provision of service versus the textbook going through the bookstore. But I do think that we need policy. And I don't think that's something that could be determined here. So we definitely need to take it outside of our regular meetings to iron these things out, to make it clear, to bring it back to Senate, what our policies are, to hash it out here, and then maybe potentially send it back with ultimately the goal, I would hope, of equity mindedness, student centeredness, transparency, to address issues of conflict of interest as well. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah. And Ruth's recommendation for policy language can be part of the resolution as that direction. And
it is, I think, the last item there.
Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, Ruth names a lot of what I was planning to name, but just really wanted to amplify it. First, I think that it sounds like there's still confusion about inclusive access as one thing, and then the materials fee as a separate thing. So wanting to make sure that we're being clear about which piece we're talking about, because it is feeling a little jumbled at times. And then kind of, I guess, commenting on what Trisha brought up regarding some of the concerns. I think there's not a perfect system per se, right? No matter what we do, there's potential that there will be some harm, but I think it's really thinking about where the harm reduction is and what is the lowest, which position has the lowest potential for harming students. And it does feel like having some clear policy guidelines that people can look at for clarity is the best way to address that. Also, as a part-timer, I didn't get a lot of feedback from folks on this, but you know, what you named in terms of the dynamics between faculty could be impacted. So really just clarifying what we as a campus approve of, both I think ethically, but also, you know, keeping equity in mind is critical. I agree that the materials fee sounds like it should be something that is tangible and long-term that I get to own forever, which access to, you know, a website may or may not fit that role. But if the access isn't permanent and forever, I think that also potentially impacts the way that we're looking at those fees. And then anything that we're doing to allow students to be able to use all of the resources that are available to them should be our best approach, right? Making sure that all students, particularly our most vulnerable and marginalized students, many of whom who are completely dependent on these book grants, should be able to use them. And it's awful when, you know, we in EOPS have students that have money that's available, but may not be able to purchase these books because of where they're being sold or how they're being offered by instructors. And then really just final point, regarding inclusive access and the opt-in, opt-out option. I do wish that I don't know if we can, or we can address what that looks like, but I do feel like students opting out of it, again, kind of to what Ruth was speaking to, like needs to be really clear, and the process needs to be made really clear, because not all students are going to know the processes for what that might look like. Again, thinking and centering our most marginalized students, and the idea that something they never even used or knew existed, potentially down the line, impacting their ability to purchase a car, to rent an apartment, to get a credit card, to, you know, meet their basic survival needs, definitely does not sit well with me. So I would definitely like to also have that conversation about how we use inclusive access and the opt-in, opt-out, what that might look like. And policy.
Thank you for that, Anna. So the time is now 4:59 p.m. and I am really committed to getting us out of here at or by 5 p.m. For each of our spring meetings. So with that in mind, I would just like to thank everyone that had contributions for this conversation. Thank you everyone that listened to those that contributed and are sitting with it and wrestling over it. At this time, I'm going to ask that senators take the current resolution that has been posted several times now and put it in front of your faculty for vetting, for feedback, for suggestions, so that at our next meeting, we can entertain those and focus our efforts there so that we can come to some ending point with this. And also so that we can give CAC very specific feedback. I was hearing a lot of a lot of you saying, we really like this and this is what we want, you know, CAC to do. And I really like that. And this seems very straightforward. Thank you, Russell, for that. So if that's what we want, we can formalize that. We can move on just that piece at our next meeting if we're not ready for the whole resolution, right? So put this resolution in front of faculty, get feedback. There was another agenda item we didn't get to today. I wasn't expecting to, so that's fine. Next week, we do not have a Senate meeting, so enjoy your 3 to 5 time away from meeting, and then we'll see you the second week in February. And Ruth has her hand up. Are you going to ask about my Los Agaves order for tonight, Ruth? Or
No, it's going to be really quick. Just recommend that when the link is ready, that we also provide the link and the timestamp to our faculty members so that they can get some context, because there's a lot of nuance here.
the link to our meeting today? Yeah, but
Yes.
Chris is really good about getting it on the drive, and then Anna helps a lot with getting it up on YouTube. So yeah, that will definitely be available in the next day or two. So good point, Ruth. All right, with that, good night, everyone. Thank you. I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh.